Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Laura Milojevic. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Simplify Solutions. Today, we're excited to have our Senior Solution Director, Beth McBreen, discussing and demoing the basics of inventory planning and SAP Analytics Cloud. When the webinar concludes, a short survey is going to appear. If you guys can please fill that out, we would really appreciate it. And then feel free to reach out to Beth or myself after the webinar with any questions. So with that, I will hand it over to Beth so she can get started. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining. As Lauren mentioned, my name is Beth McBreen. I am an architect, client partner, kind of wear all types of hats here at Simplify. But I've been in consulting probably longer than I want to admit. Started off in more of a corporate finance role, have been involved in solutions like the business planning and consolidation for certainly, over a decade. And then the last, probably 6 years or so with the SAP Analytics Cloud solution, kind of watching where it's gone from its infancy up to really turning into more of a mature solution. And so today, hopefully, we're going to talk a little bit about how SAC can be used in the form of inventory planning. This is probably one of a few series of webinars that we're going to conduct that plays a little bit more into that S&OP area, right? And how we can actually leverage SAC, kind of combining that with, as we look at all the other different, kind of just standard sales planning, as well as your financial view of planning. So today, really focusing on a couple areas I'll show you. We'll get into a couple slides here, and then in large part, going to try and share most of our time today in the demonstration. So a couple quick things before I get started. If you're new to Simplify or who we are, Simplify Solutions, we're an implementation partner for SAP. Really our wheelhouse, or kind of our bread and butter area, is in around finance, planning, analytics, consolidations, right? So most of many of our functional consultants all have a background, MBA, CPA. We've worked, within the corporate finance area. In addition to that, though, of course, we have our technical team that goes hand in hand, where we might be focusing on other platforms such as Business Warehouse, things like Data Warehouse Cloud. So also, taking those into consideration as well. We are headquartered in Chicago area, as well as we have office in Montreal. All right, so that's us. And then, something that I think just kind of sets us aside a little bit is more around our prepackaged content, right? So we have a number of different prepackaged content that we share. We're able to roll this out to companies. It's been very effective for companies that we have used this for, and really is kind of a leading approach for us when we go in and look at, your primary reason for adopting SAC, right? Whether that be for planning, maybe it's specific to something like headcount planning or HR planning. We're able to take a look at our prepackaged content and see how closely we align, right? What does that do? That obviously helps with your implementation timeline and getting that to go live or deployment state. It certainly helps with, then we kind of look and do that gap analysis that helps, and we're able to obviously customize those areas that maybe don't fit 100%. So that's kind of how we go into a lot of our projects. You can see here some of the different areas that we really specialize in and kind of can bring some of that expertise to the table. So for those, just a quick solution overview, and then what we're kind of going to be talking about today. I would maybe expect that, given the topic of today's webinar, that maybe you're already familiar with SAC or SAP Analytics Cloud, but I didn't want to just go ahead and assume that. So just a quick, if you're brand new and just trying to learn a little bit about the tool itself, right? SAP Analytics Cloud, or the acronym SAC, solution, one solution that really allows you to perform your BI and analytics capabilities, all of your different planning scenarios, workflows, all of that really kind of enriched planning capabilities in SAC. Predictive, right? Machine learning, guided discoveries, those type of activities are all available also in SAC. It also has kind of a custom application design. So what you see and what you will see in the demonstration, the nice thing about SAC is it's really a user-driven interface, self-service, right? It's providing different objects or widgets to build, whether I want reports, graphs, tables, key indicator points. All of those are kind of at your fingertips to build within SAC. There's obviously an application design that gets a little bit more complex. You want things a little bit more specific to your company design or things along those lines. Absolutely can still do that in SAC. What doesn't mention here that maybe is just already implied is reporting. Right, so just with your BI and analytics, many companies take advantage of producing their financial reporting sets out of SAC and further. So again, just a quick little summary on SAP Analytics Cloud. In the event that you're joining our webinar today and it's very new to you, it's a cloud platform, so users typically access this, through Chrome or Edge. And then again, able to jump into their applications, their reports and dashboards and things along those lines. Okay. So quick overview on that as we kind of, again, peel back the onion just a little bit and we talk not yet specific to inventory planning, but just planning in general, right? So this goes, and you're going to see in the demonstration, one of the things that we focus on is the scenario planning. So as it relates to inventory planning, oh my God, if we had a point where we're at capacity and what are some of the different scenarios that we may have to take a look at, right, in order to make sure that we can accommodate the demand that's coming in, right? So we'll take a look at some of that scenario planning today in SAC as it relates to the inventory plan. But just, in general, that capability of top down or bottoms up. So some of this, what you're going to see today, we're actually doing from more of a higher level, top down, kind of what if we make adjustments and how does that trickle all the way down? Certainly all the way down to material level information, building that plan all the way up. Absolutely, those capabilities exist bidirectionally, right? So being able to set up things like your driver-based, even having the predictive forecast, right? Leveraging algorithms within SAC, all of that just from a standard plan, whether we're talking about inventory planning, people cost planning, OpEx planning, right? All of those, these are inherent planning functionality that allows us to really streamline our process, as it relates to even workflow or task assignment, making sure that the overall collaboration of that planning exercise is taken into account. Also things that SAC does very well. Okay, so that's just, again, kind of walking through SAC in general, what the product is, now focusing on, specific what the planning capabilities are, and now let's just talk about, kind of objectives within enterprise-wide planning, right? So now we look at SAC as not really just a financial tool, right? Or not just necessarily a financial solution. This is now where we can really start to kind of utilize that collaborative enterprise planning, where we're looking at the sales organization to, help provide the sales plans, pricing. We're looking at marketing, actually, maybe to provide some more of that pricing campaigns, projects, things that are going on along those lines. Obviously, within the HR, kind of workforce management and planning, right? So you can start to see where we have these different areas that can all come together, and it's not necessarily, again, just held and maintained within the finance organization. We're able to expand that out based on SAC as a platform, right? And so today, while we're talking about a very small piece, supply chain is a big animal. as far as, consensus demand planning, inventory planning and management, looking at, DCs and warehouse management, all those pieces. So obviously today we're kind of focused on a small area within here. But again, this slide just kind of trying to visualize that SAC really can kind of push that out to different areas within your organization, right? And that also helps with creating that clear accountability, that one version of the truth, right? Everything's kind of feeding into one solution where we have less of these black boxes, less of these, again, spreadsheets or other that are kind of happening offline where we're not getting to see maybe the full picture or too high of a level where we would like one solution to be able to kind of contain everything. So again, and I showed actually a similar slide when I was talking about sales and margin planning in a webinar not too long ago. And in that case, we were really talking about the alignment between FP&A and S&OP. And we also talk about other products, right? So SAC, again, being primarily when we look at for financial planning, a tool like IBP, very focused around the S&OP process. However, what we've understood, what we've seen at companies is sometimes that merges together more so than not. And sometimes, again, wanting to have that one source, having a single, and maybe it's not, again, some of the level of detail, it could be the same group. Departments that are in charge of really both of those. So if we don't have a very strong, supply chain department, for example, that is managing and handling all these pieces, some of that might actually align with the financial group as well. In which, again, having one solution, one, to train, to understand, a lot of that makes sense, right? And so that's kind of what we're looking at. And again, today, we're going to look at specifically some of the alignment, right? So kind of understanding that, hey, we've got different scenarios and different data. And we're starting off our story as already having that data. So there's a sales plan, there's a financial plan, right? So how are we going to align those? Where do we see deltas? And then ultimately, what does the system do when it comes to capacity planning, right? So now when I'm looking at my demand, and how am I now allocating that to my plants? And when I'm over allocated and at capacity, what do we do? What are different options? So that's kind of what today's scenario really is going to be focused around. And so just as I mentioned for the demonstration, right, it's just, again, kind of incorporation of that demand plan, sales plan, looking at things like plant level capacity, preparing constraint level planning, looking at just, again, from a roll forward perspective, having that inventory planning where we're able to see by product, okay, here's my inventory, my beginning inventory, my shipments, my units produced, right? So we have kind of that ongoing roll forward within our inventory balances. We're able to see that both from a units perspective and dollars. And then, as I mentioned, just some scenario modeling, right? Being able to, based off of some of the, possibly unconstrained demand plans coming in, looking at where we're over capacity, how we're going to react to that. So we'll show you some of that. Obviously, you'll see throughout the demonstration also the reporting, the analytics, the visualizations that kind of come along with it. All right. So I will pause here for 1 second and jump over to my demonstration. Okay, so we start our story before we actually jump in to maybe before we even start into the sales side. For those of you that may be entirely new to SAC, just to level set where we're at, what we're doing, right? Again, I'm in Chrome, so I have tabs up at the top here. I can have multiple tabs open, as you'll see as I actually launch into different pages. But again, within my tab here on my page is what we call a story, right? My story can have multiple pages or tabs, as you can kind of see noted here. I can have filters where I can filter based on different dimensionality that I have set up in my model. And so basically what this is allowing me to do is I'm coming in and now I can interact. Either this could be a dashboard where I'm more KPI view and where I want to maybe interact and drill down. Maybe this is in the form of actually an input as a sales manager. I may want to come in and make some adjustments to this. But in any event, this is where a lot of that is done, and you will see a similar format as we go through the screens, right? This is all customizable. The fact that I want a blue banner and I want, my header to say sales volume planning, all of that obviously is just the way that we designed it, and is all customizable, kind of like I mentioned, in more of a self-service fashion. So, okay, so now that we've kind of set where we're at and how we're using it, I start my story today kind of putting on my hat just real quickly from a sales plan perspective, right? Just wanted to illustrate that within the same, SAC solution, might be in a separate model, we have where potentially your sales managers are coming in and providing their updated plan. Right, and so this ultimately then gets transferred over, and that information is shared and provided on the supply side, right, from an inventory perspective, and we'll get there in just one moment. But just to kind of draw your eyes around here, as a sales manager responsible, I can come in here, I can do a few things. I can plan based on more of a dashboard view, where I can say, for a specific customer group, if I wanted, or the particular material groups that I'm working with, I can come in and make changes directly there. I can list here, I have my top 10 customers that I'm looking at for my next year's budget, right? So I could come in here and I could say, okay, well, again, more on a dashboard view, I could come in and actually give and say this customer is going to increase by 20%, or I'm going to make that assumption. It'll go ahead and actually move it to the top here, because now it is going to be our top customer for 2022. So just again, that could be very high level. I see more, again, more scenario planning type situations there. We also have very detailed templates that allow you, again, still from more of a sales angle, right? This is where I'm building up my sales plan to say, here's what the demand is going to be. And so here you can see maybe a little bit more detail. I have, a hand cream as my material group, and then I have my actual materials that fall different within that material group. Same thing, I could go down to a very granular level. That's all I wanted to point out here before I move over to inventory, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, right? Because where does that information come from? Part of it is going to come from this model here, where the sales managers are providing input, right? They may be providing up what ultimately we're going to be able to sell for the year, right? Financial plan also included in SAC might be more from a target setting. What does executive management want to see that we're going to sell for the year, right? And then we have obviously what we can produce in a year, right, on the inventory side. And that's kind of what we're going to move over into my next tab here, where we have kind of a flow that I'll work with. So let's take that assumption, right, that we've got the sales plan, our demand, and what we think that for the year we're going to be able to sell. Couple things that we set up in SAC that helps drive the calculations. And so this is, again, just more informational. These can be adjusted and reviewed as needed. But as we start to look at from a supply and inventory planning and kind of supply standpoint, we obviously have capacities by plants. And so this is a very simple example, so easy to read. So rather than having a very long table that included, but obviously, like anything else, we have our filters along the side. If I wanted to just filter on, if we had, 50 plants, I could certainly filter on just a particular plant and look at what the capacity levels are for each one of my products, right? So here, and the way that we had originally designed it is that our capacity thresholds is what really drives priority. So what do I mean by that? If we take hand cream as an example here, and I can see for the year, it's saying that plant 20 is going to be able to produce 714,000 units, right? And so by default, the plant 20 has the first priority. If we hit capacity on plant 20, that overspills to look to see what capacity is available on plant 10. Okay, and so on and so forth. And again, that's not something that is customizable. So if you're looking to do something similar, you can do that. If you want to set specific thresholds manually, you can also do that. And then furthermore, there's even in this demonstration, again, trying to keep it a little bit from the basics, right, and just show kind of some general examples. But we've seen where obviously it's not just here's how many units this plant can produce. We might actually be going down to plant lines, right? So actually going to our lines and hours, right? How many hours it takes for it to particularly produce one of our products. So a lot of that, again, kind of goes in underneath here. What we're talking about here is just more, where what I would say a more summarized version, where we're just showing you here's how many units, right, each plant will be able to produce. Apologize for that. So then we have, in addition to our capacity review, one of the other items that we have to set up for our plan is what we're calling our target inventory. Basically, what this page is showing is our target ending inventory quantities by period, by plant, by product, right? This target inventory is what impacts the production by plant as our data action or our calculation. If we're not familiar with the term data action, that is a trigger in SAC that allows us to run a calculation. Sets production levels, and it makes sure to include the target inventory. So, target inventory, I guess, sometimes maybe you're referring to that as safety stock, basically ensuring that we have a level. And so here, many times, based on when you're planning and looking at inventory levels, you may want to come in and go ahead and modify what those safety stock levels are going to be. Right, and so this would be an opportunity where you certainly can come in and you could change whichever you would want, however you would want your target inventory to be, and then the overall calculation from your inventory roll forward will take that into consideration. Okay, so again, those couple things that we're setting up to make sure that we have kind of our overall inventory plan established here. And this is just, again, another view. Hopefully you're kind of taking note where we have some nice visualizations. You'll see some coming up as well. But here on this view, this is actually going to give me my full inventory balance view, right? So I can see here for my different product groups, if I wanted to specifically go into some of my individual products here, and then I can go ahead and expand down into my inventory, and I can see my beginning inventory, what I'm producing for the month, what the demand is coming in is telling me how many shipments I'm going to be making for that month, and then ultimately then what does that mean for my ending inventory for that product, right? So, and I can see as my ending inventory rolls from January into my beginning balance in February, and so on and so forth, right? So technically, just kind of walks through my roll forward and allows me to kind of run through and always look at my ending inventory here. we're kind of focused and have been focused and primarily are focused on volumes during this demonstration. But just to point out, you have the capability here, right, where I have inventory as in units. If I also want to take a look at inventory dollars, right, I can easily do that same thing by just changing. I have a filter here that looks at it in units, and then I can take a look and expand this out and look at it in dollars as well, right, based on the assumptions and obviously that are set up in the system as well, right, to be able to convert those to my dollars. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just change this actually back to units, volumes. We'll go from there. Okay, so again, this kind of gives you, I mean, I guess I should mention too, you can do this at a higher level. We can do this at a lower level. Obviously, where we're stopping here in our demonstration, there's obviously a lot additional to consider, right? You have your SKU level information that is probably a level deeper than here, as well as things like your unit of measure. And so again, I can see that level of detail embedded in here as well. I can also go all the way down to see, you know, from a beginning inventory standpoint here. Well, in this example, everything's in plant 10, but if we had another example where we could see where our beginning inventory exists, you know, for that analysis purpose. All right, so let's take a look at, again, kind of now that we have some of those pieces, and I've shown you how that builds up a little bit and how we can kind of see what the overall inventory roll forward would be. Wanted to showcase a little bit around that, the capacity, you know, scenario planning as we look at, you know, taking a look at our plans, right, and saying, well, where we have maybe some inconsistencies, where we have some deltas and we need to react to those, and we want to make sure that we understand for next year how we're going to be able to do that. And so here you can kind of see we've got a dashboard set up for management or for users to take a look at, and I can see that here I have annual versus, let me set this to do not disturb, apologize about that. Here you can see I'm basically comparing my annual plan to what has come in as my unconstrained plan. And it looks like for the most part, and then I have some thresholds set up. As long as we are within, you know, a certain number of units, then we're going to, you know, show green. We're going to be in an okay state. And so I notice here that if I scroll down, everything looks okay, except for my product group within my hands material group, and specifically around plant 20. Right, so I can do a couple things just to kind of maybe showcase a little bit of the functionality of SAC. I can even use my pie chart here and take a look at the hands total. I can click that out and I can drill down, right, and say I want to drill down on my product group. So when I do that, you know, in this case, I have two different, I have either nail polish or hand cream, and I have different plants as well. So now by drilling into that, right now I can actually see a little bit more detail and say, okay, within that material group, it's specifically my nail polish and specifically within plant 20. Okay, I can also then kind of see down here my inventory levels as well as where my my unconstrained plan is falling and where I'm going to obviously have to make some adjustments. So using then a view such as this with our plan review, we can see here I've kind of following our storyline, right, of nail polish and plant 20. I obviously have these filtered here that flows through from my summary page. But if I wanted to go ahead and do some other analysis on, you know, different plants, different products, obviously all of that is capable of using those slicers and those filters within your story here. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it on nail polish here and just kind of talk through what we see here on the screen then. One of the key things that I was trying to mention even in the beginning and how we're pulling this all together, right, is we have our annual plan, we have a financial plan, we have our sales plan, right? So we have different versions that we're taking a look at. We have here kind of our unconstrained, constrained plan. And what it's telling me is that I can see I have a delta to my annual plan here in my June and July timeframe. And so in that case, we can, maybe make mention of a new or a booked customer order for 13,000 units, right? We're wanting to try and make sure that we get back to our annual plan since now we're currently trending beneath that or below. And so here I also, in SAC, you have the ability to kind of make these top side adjustments, right? We absolutely could go back, make adjustments into all the details that we wanted to. But again, as I'm now reviewing the overall plan, I'm comparing, I'm going to say, you know what, we know that there's another additional 13,000 units coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and propose those for June and July, right? So notice when I do that, what does it do? SAC automatically will highlight cells yellow when there's a change, and then there's been a change in the number and impact. So immediately when I say, okay, well, that's great, now we're back on track against plan, we now have capacity, we have a constraint issue. And I need to take a look at and see that my at risk right here allows me visibility. The calculation within here allows me visibility to see, okay, we could severely be, significantly be at risk of not being able to produce the amount necessary within these months. So that's what, again, as the plans are updated or changed, having kind of this review in the summary page to be able to react to those, right? This can tell me right away, and then what am I going to do? And this is where the scenario planning comes into play in SAC. So we've offered up, obviously there's a couple different options. One, we are just focused on plant 20. We are focused on one product. We do know that plant 10 is second priority. So yes, of course, we look to see, well, does plant 10, is plant 10 at capacity? If not, can we allow those units to be produced there? However, there's another couple scenarios that we can also embed and have some of the embedded calculations help us with making these decisions, right? So if I entered those in, the first option maybe that I'm going to make outside of what we just discussed was the option of either like that pre-production, right? So maybe I'm gonna go ahead and just go to this scenario that I set up. And so here, now let's talk through some of our accounts here, but basically I'm looking at, again, focusing in on this plant, focusing now in on this product, and I'm saying, okay, here's my inventory plan or my ending inventory. Here's the capacity that we are able to produce, and here's the demand. And we can start to see, if we skip over this pre-produced line for a second, we can start to see our gap to demand looks good up until we start to hit really July timeframe, right? So, in looking at that, we can also see right beneath it where we have availability, right? So by looking at this and saying, okay, we know that this is booked orders that we're going to be producing. Maybe we can produce these ahead of time, right? And do this in earlier months so that we don't have to, potentially look externally or potentially turn down orders, right? Or have to lengthen out when they're actually going to be shipped. So to help prepare for that, you can kind of see, again, I can come up and adjust that in my pre-produced line. So if I come in here and say, all right, well, I want the 13,000 that we were that we looked at was our adjustment for in June and July, I'm going to go ahead and say, let's produce those actually in January because we have that capacity available. So now you'll notice that when I put that number in there, right, what does it do? It automatically tells me what now my new capacity availability is. It tells me what my usage and my cumulative usage is across, and so on and so forth. So a lot of different KPIs and metrics that I can also look at. But in large part, I can see that by doing that, now I no longer have a significant gap to demand, right? So by making that change, I want to go back to my review, my summary page, if you will. Here's where I'm still showing my baseline, right? This is my baseline where I'm comparing to plan and knowing here's my demand coming in. And if I say, okay, well, if I'm going to add on instead and produce those units ahead of time, when I do that in my filter, I'm taking my baseline and I'm adding on that pre-production component. And when I do that, notice that my risk levels go significantly lower. I have maybe a 2% risk here, which might be tolerable, right? We might have some inherent risk in most cases, but we typically can set up thresholds to say also what is that tolerable risk that we're willing to take. But in this case, you can see going forward where we were at 17%, planning that ahead of time. So that gives me the ability to say, okay, that's one scenario. Another scenario would be, well, if I don't have the capacity to make it in-house, do I need to go out and look externally and either buy a product or have somebody make the product for me? And so that is also another option, which is another scenario that we that we set up. So here we have more of an option of, again, going externally, taking a look at what that could be as an option, right? So from here, we're really observing that we have that gap to demand, similar, same that we saw in the pre-produce, right? This is a new scenario or new version. One of the things that I probably did not point out, if I click on here, no, I'll have to show on a different screen here, is the version management, right? So is that capability to come in and create these different versions. Right here, we kind of set them up so it's easier from a demo perspective, but really as a user, you're able to go in and create multiple different versions, private versions, sandbox type versions, so that you can kind of do this nice comparison, right? So here again, kind of circling back, I can see my gap to demand now with this procure buy scenario, and I can see that again, I've got some issues here. I'm going to go ahead and type in then what I want. Again, those 13,000 units is what really kind of knocked us out of whack. So I'm going to add the 13,000. Typically here, I don't have an explanation noted here, but we're assuming that there's going to be lead time. So we know that we're going to have to probably purchase these a month or two in advance. Right, so we'll put the 13,000 in May. That will allow us to adjust. And then same thing as I did before, we come back to our plan review, right? And now I can kind of take a look at not the pre-produce, but now if we look at our procure option, we have similar results, right? So what does that tell me? It tells me that, okay, I could go in and I had the capacity in earlier months, so we could go ahead and produce those units earlier, and then they would just be available as inventory on our shelves. I could wait until later on in the year, and then I could go out and actually procure or buy, or like I said, or have an external source, potentially make those products for us. And that would be less time on less shelf life, but potentially higher cost, right? And so what helps me determine which one? Because looking at this, they both will at least satisfy my issue of my capacity constraints, right? So lastly, in SAC, it gives you the ability, again, to compare these different versions, right? So I have my, let's see if I can run essentially my metrics. And basically what this does is it aligns and it takes a look at my baseline, which comes over from my demand, any adjustments that are made. It will apply, and then it looks at any other scenarios that I'm assuming to look at, right? So that the pre-produce, whether I'm pre-producing, procure, or buy. Just go ahead and run this in the background. And then what we see here and is that essentially we can take a look at our different metrics, and I can see that from here, try and analyze and determine what's going to be the best option for me. Here in our case, it's very similar, but I can see obviously from baseline, because we would be giving up those orders, right, if we didn't find a way to accommodate those. So obviously, if we're pre-producing them, our revenue dollars are going to be higher than our baseline. Also, we can see, although slight, we can see that our margins are better if we produce these units early versus procure buy, because of the, I would anticipate that our costs would be higher, right, to purchase externally versus make them in-house. So, and these are obviously based on certain metrics and weights that are provided and customizable in SAC, but just a way, again, to kind of help determine, okay, what's going to be the best scenario based on those changes and what's coming in, from all your different plan reviews. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to share today. Again, looking at what we saw today, just kind of circling back at, in summary fashion, just talking about being able to look at the different plan views in SAC, right? Or looking at our volumes, our units planning as it relates to kind of our annual, a view coming from our financial group, from our sales managers, kind of understanding then what we have is in terms of an unconstrained demand plan and how we then handle that situation where we do have capacity constraints, right? And then hopefully seeing some of those, inventory targets and setup, what I kind of consider more as behind the scenes setup, something that the administrator is looking at, or the planner is continuously maybe looking at things like safety stock or inventory balances to make adjustments for. Those are really, kind of what we showed in the beginning. This latter part was more focused on, how SAC is powerful around that scenario planning objective. So, as I mentioned before we close out here, if you do have any questions as it relates, to what you saw today, to what we have available, please, my contact information is here. I believe you would also have Lauren's contact information from the email that were sent. We do have additional focus areas that will be coming up. So things like consensus demand planning, right? So how are we actually getting those different areas at a detailed level to come to a consensus on volumes, right? So that is really the start of the process, right? And how that gets pushed over to inventory. As I mentioned before, looking at inventory planning, even further granular down to, line or plant asset type operations, looking at some of those values too. So yeah, definitely look out for some of our future webinars as it relates to some of the processes around S&OP, and hopefully you'll get to see value in those as well. So thank you so much for your time, and have a nice rest of your day.